Help support AMTV by becoming a patron, an AMTV staff member, and following us over on Twitter.
But as far as the here and now is concerned, for tomorrow, just be prepared for Thor and his lightning bolts.
It's the British's favourite topic, the weather. Today, finding out about the weather is easier than ever, but just a few short decades ago, you'd often be tuning into the television to get the most up-to-date weather bulletin, which of course, both back then and indeed now, wasn't always the most accurate.
The BBC and said she heard that there was a hurricane on the way. Well, if you're watching, don't worry, there isn't.
In the earliest days of television, the weather was often relayed by charts and then later presenters in vision using magnets to signify what kind of weather would hit where. But in early 1985, at a time when the BBC was revamping its flagship channel, BBC One, there was also a big change coming to one of TV's most surefire staples, a change in the weather.
This is BBC Television.
The BBC had used a globe motif as its central ident for quite some time, first introducing the concept in the early 60s. Some 20 years later, audiences had grown used to the mechanical noddy globes spinning around their screens every single day between programmes, and for start-up and close-down.
But for the moment, from BBC Television, from all of us here, it's good night to you.
But change is always going to come, and with the advent of computer graphics technology, broadcasters in the UK and around the world wanted to adopt this new creative outlet fast. BBC Two had been one of the first, as demonstrated with its 1979 ident, but it was perhaps Channel 4 that made the biggest initial impact with computer graphics for TV channels, when it launched on the 2nd of November 1982. Not to be outdone, and keen to reshape its image, BBC One was due a makeover, one that would retain the globe iconography, but do away with clunky old mirror models and bring in the most up-to-date computer technology available. The result was this.
A brand new look to launch the early evening lineup. At 7 on Tuesdays and Thursdays, drama with the EastEnders. On Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays, the live and lively entertainment is provided by Terry Wogan.
The computer-originated world, or COW for short. This would debut on Monday the 18th of February 1985. That morning, at just after noon on BBC One, a special programme aired detailing the previously mentioned change in the weather, hosted by senior weatherman and audience favourite Bill Giles.
This programme isn't about the weather itself, but about the way we present it to you on television. We're about to make a major change. A direct link to one of the world's foremost weather forecasting computers will enable us to give you a better picture of what we expect to happen, and if we get it wrong, a better understanding of why weather forecasting is not an exact science.
That description alone is like a goldmine for TV enthusiasts. Also nice that Bill here covers their backs despite the advancement in technology. First, we get a little history lesson on how weather was presented on TV, from its birth right up until the then present time of 1985.
This chart that we saw earlier, not perhaps the most helpful of devices, was later accompanied by a script read by an announcer, and that simple type of forecast is still used today. But in 1954, it was decided that a fuller explanation of the forecast needed someone in vision to tell the story. During this time, all of us have shared one common aim, and that is to tell the daily weather story as simply and as clearly as possible.
Hello there, and if you got wet today, well, you were decidedly unlucky because there wasn't much heavy rain at all about. There was some few spots here and there in western areas, and the southeast of England has stayed dry, although it's got progressively more cloudy.
Looking back at weather forecasts in the black and white era, God forbid if you had poor eyesight. Keep in mind, viewers would be watching this on a small set, and if the reception wasn't great, even worse picture quality. Still, the low-tech nature has its charm, doesn't it? They don't make them like this anymore. Next up, we get told about the wonders of magnetic rubber, as this was used to help the BBC present the different weather symbols, that is, when they worked.
Today you will find one or two showers dotted about here and there, and as the day goes on I think you're going to find these showers will tend to become heavier and more frequent, and many of them could well turn out later on in the day to be fairly thundery with some, oh dear, let's do it again.
It's very interesting to see that they use this clip. For you see that BBC VT symbol in the top corner there? Well, this clip of Michael Fish was taken from a BBC Christmas tape. Whilst a relatively tame clip, those Xmas oddities were, and still are, infamous. I did make a couple of videos on them, but they've been blocked worldwide by the Beebs, so you'll have to find and check the tapes out on your own time. And don't worry, Michael, one of these dropping off is going to be the least of your problems.
The BBC and said she heard that there was a hurricane on the way. Well, if you're watching, don't worry, there isn't.
The familiar sun and rain symbols which you saw in that clip arrived in 1975, and I well remember doing the first broadcast with them. They may have caused the odd problem, but have more than served their purpose because they made a successful attempt to broaden an interest in the weather to the widest audience.
And now a real treat. Archive weather forecasts, but from around the world. I hope you know at least one other language.
E em relação às quantidades de precipitação, chuva resultante de aguaceiros ou chuva, as quantidades mais significativas ocorreram na Serra da Estrela, 62 milímetros. De realçar che ao fim da tarde registraram-se i primeiros nevões na Serra da Estrela.
Adesso cominciamo la nostra esposizione della situazione con leggere le temperature registrate alle ore 13 di oggi. Catania 22, Reggio Calabria, Messina e Palermo 20, Pescara, Napoli e Bari 19, Roma, Catanzaro, Cagliari 16, Venezia, Genova, Ancona e Alghero 15, Bologna, Firenze e Pisa 14, Trieste, L'Aquila, Campobasso e Potenza 13, Milano, Torino e Perugia 12, Bolzano e Verona 9 gradi.
Bonsoir, ce temps frais des dernières 48 heures, ce temps frais accompagné d'averses de neige, de grêle, d'orage et surtout de cette terrible tempête appartient heureusement au passé. Cette dépression se trouve actuellement sur l'UR.
Trykket her, det forsterker seg noe. Nordenfor har vi et lavtrykksområde med tilhørende nedbørområde, og disse beveger seg østover. Nedbørområdet kommer inn over Troms til natten, og...
Imagine having to present and maneuver all of these whilst live on air. No matter what language you speak, that must be nerve-wracking in itself. I bet they must have been somewhat relieved to take a more electronic route.
But to find out how we're updating our presentation, I'll take you on a quick guided tour starting at Bracknell in Berkshire. The Meteorological Office. It's part of the Ministry of Defence and one of the world's 3 main centres for strategic weather forecasting, the others being in Washington and Moscow.
Ah, not again.
A new link between the computer here and another television centre will enable us to show how the weather will develop in an exciting graphical manner.
Did you hear that? Exciting. Oh boy, is it so exciting. Just you wait.
Using a mathematical model of the whole world's atmosphere, this powerful machine crunches numbers at the rate of over 400 million calculations a second. Well, with this typical home computer, it would take us about 70 days non-stop to do the calculations, whereas the large computer here can do it in about 4 minutes. And if I were to try it myself with a pencil and a rubber, it would probably take me forever. And then I'd probably get it wrong.
I bet our modern-day phones could do it in a matter of minutes. That's advancement for you.
I suppose in another 10 years, it'll all fit in a suitcase. Psst, anybody want a computer?
You're not wrong there, buddy. You aren't wrong there.
What's the point in having chaps like me around? Well, the Met Office places great emphasis on the experience of human forecasters as well as the computer.
Reassuring, though, that there was still a human element to forecasting the weather back then. I wonder if there still is these days, or if it's all completely done by computers or AI.
When I was a lad, this job took me over an hour using a pair of pens strapped together. This plotter does it in 7 minutes, and it's much neater than I ever was. And indeed, even this has now been superseded, and by using a technique known affectionately as the flying spot, the computer can plot the same chart in the twinkling of an eye. It produces a great number of different charts to help the forecasters make their judgments on what's the most likely thing to happen to the weather. And it's this information in a form that we can understand at the BBC that we're going to use. In fact, the computer translates from the Met Office language into a BBC language, and this, in a digital form, will be disappearing down this hole and into the British Telecom system.
I blow through here, the music goes round and around, whoa, 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 and it comes up here.
And it comes out here. Or is it here? Now we're in Television Centre in London. Throughout the day and night, the Bracknell computer delivers its information to the computer graphics area here.
Yee, sort out your cable management.
Also housed in this area is an electronic paint box, a clever piece of graphics computery that produces all the very high-quality pictures that you'll see. The information flows down the cable from the VAX to draw or paint lines or symbols over the maps already sitting in its own store. All clever stuff. For 2 years now, a team of programmers and graphic designers have been working away producing the maps and diagrams for the system. These days, even pencil and paper are computerized, and some of the development work was done on this electronic artist's pad. And so the BBC's computer graphic workshop swung into action. The one thing we haven't changed, though, are the symbols themselves, as over the last 10 years, they've become almost as well known as the road signs.
I agree with Bill here. They are as memorable as the road signs. We do love the weather symbols.
When the weatherman arrives in the morning to start preparing the day's forecast, the first job, after getting the coffee that is to study the charts that come in on our MUFAX machines and get a good briefing on the current and future weather situation. These charts come in overnight from the same computer that we saw at the Met Office. Well, after studying those MUFAX charts, I now come to my small computer. This helps me to construct the electronic slideshow that we're going to show you on the weather forecast. It then gives instructions via this modem to the main computer upstairs, which in turn instructs the paint box to draw me some pretty pictures on this screen. Now it's time to get the mouse out of its cage, and this is the mouse. It's a piece of equipment which allows me to move a pointer around the screen and select any piece of information I want to and put it anywhere on my map.
People talk about 80s tech, which was obviously revolutionary back then, and just loving how primitive it all is now. We could all make our own weather forecasts in this day and age, couldn't we? With much more advanced software too. Now we move to where the weather forecast was actually filmed and broadcast in studio.
Go on, clear off out of the way. Well, this is the studio where we transmit the weather. All the weather images are stored on a magnetic disc, so we need a way to show them to you and for me to be able to see what I'm pointing at. To put me in the picture, we use a system known as colour separation overlay. Sounds posh, I know, but all that's needed is for me to stand in front of a blue screen and the electronics do the rest. I said a tropical island, not a traffic island. This is all very clever, but all I can still see is a plain blue screen. So for me to see what I have to point at for the forecast, we use a projector situated behind here. This is actually a projection screen, and we shine the weather pictures on the back so that I can actually see what I'm pointing at. Then if we switch on everything together, hey presto, now I can see the charts and so can you.
Again, this may all seem primitive now, but think of how exciting this would have been, not just for viewers, but for the presenters like Bill Giles. They could finally do away with a lot of the fiddly aspects of presenting the weather, using the most current technology to hopefully deliver a smoother and more accurate prediction of the coming weather.
Satellite pictures too, we can see the movies going on through the past 24 hours. The one thing to notice at the top in here, because it's past data, the numbers will come up in blue, and we'll be showing you these sequences for every 3 hours. As well as satellite pictures, you'll find the pressure maps. We can put on the lows, the highs, we can put on the fronts as well, and of course we can animate this through a series. The other thing to notice here, because this is forecast data, you'll find the colour in the top changes to yellow.
Nice little way of distinguishing past and future by the change of colour. I'm not sure this is something that is still done today. I suppose it isn't needed. But I love the fun little ways the team thought of to differentiate back in the 80s.
Well, the other display that we're going to show is a league table. We've chosen 13 towns and cities up and down the country so we can show the wettest, the coldest, the warmest, the sunniest places in the last 24 hours or even in the last year if we want to.
And perhaps the biggest change of all, how temperature will be referred to.
But there is one immediate change. As from today, we're harmonising with the rest of the Met Office world by replacing centigrade temperature scale with the Celsius one.
Nah, they just changed it from centigrade to Celsius. Apparently this was in line with the Met Office of the time. I'm not really sure what the big deal was. Someone can fill me in the comments. And for anyone who uses Fahrenheit, don't worry.
And of course, we shall still tell you the Fahrenheit equivalent. Well, that's our new system. We hope that it'll provide you with not only the most up-to-date forecast on television, courtesy of the Met Office computer, but in a way that's exciting and easily understood.
And with that lovely little line delivery from Bill Giles, the credits begin to roll. The director of the programme was a man called Bernard Newnham, and the full programme can be found on YouTube from a channel bearing his name. If this was the real Bernard Newnham who uploaded and thus preserved the programme, thank you all very much from us TV enthusiasts. A Change in the Weather is a kind of BBC programme that could have only been made by the BBC, but sadly represents a kind of programme that just isn't made anymore. A change in how the weather is forecast these days would barely get a mention anywhere, I suspect. Certainly not its own dedicated 20-minute programme on the main TV channel. But of course, this was a different time. 1985 was a time when only 4 channels were accessible to most audiences. 24-hour broadcasting was only just being discussed as an upcoming plan, the internet was still far off from being available to the masses, and as such, little leaps in technology, and yes, even when it came to how the weather data was gathered and presented, could be a cause for excitement, or at the very least, some intrigue. Like I said before, I love little programs such as this, as it's not only fascinating to see behind the scenes on such things, but it also provides a great historical record visually into the way things were done back then. And as the weather, along with a lot of the BBC, started to embrace computer graphics and indeed digital technology, things could only get better for the weather forecasts. Apart from maybe one day in 1987.
Don't worry, there isn't.
I think that deserves its own video in the future, don't you? For me, someone who grew up in the digital age, Bill Giles' cries of how exciting this new change in the weather would be seem a little overblown. But maybe, had I been around in 1985, I would have found this programme, this change, this leap forward in weather forecasting on television, to be the most exciting moment of the day.
What's that one? Is that the moon? Is that the moon?
No, that's a temperature one. But we don't really want to try one of them at the moment.
Sun, I'll put the sun.
All right, have a sun.
A bit like Space Invaders, isn't it?
Just be prepared for Thor and his lightning balls.
Thank you to our patrons for helping to support the show, and a special thank you to Macra, Shaun Knock, Daud Khan, Liam De-Maine, AJ Mac 200017, Deck, Jen, Traffy, Evanhart 42 Radio, Tim Ripley, Mr. Eurovision 1986, Marnano Thurman, John Wakefield, 40-something Manchild, Jerry Ralph, John McLeod, James Wallace, Ben, Stephen Oliver, Tegan, Shadowfiend 180X, Swan Ronson, Adam Gamer, Fonzie Daz, Seraphic Euphoria, Real Random, John, Matthew Elliff, Pigeon's House, and Shah H, our AMTV staff members.
Don't worry, there isn't.